What is your main takeaway on this story right now? What would the FBI be looking at right now?
Good morning, ma'am. I think the priority one are these backpacks and these pieces of evidence that we've seen in that video.
The last time Nancy Guthrie was seen alive, she was laughing. It was 9:50 p.m. on January 31st, 2026, and the 84-year-old was saying goodnight to her son-in-law after a quiet family dinner. He watched her walk inside her Catalina Foothills home, the garage door closing behind her, the desert darkness settling over the neighborhood like it had every night for the 5 decades she had lived there. She was safe. She was home. She was minutes away from bed, from her medication, from the pacemaker that kept her heart beating steadily through the night. No one who saw her that evening could have imagined that within 5 hours she would be gone, that her doorbell camera would be disabled, that her blood would be found on the front porch, that her phone would be left behind, her medication untouched, her body vanished into a landscape so vast and unforgiving that search teams with drones and horses and helicopters would find nothing. Absolutely nothing. 42 days have passed since that night. And this week, Sheriff Chris Nanos gave an interview that changes everything we thought we knew about what happened to Nancy Guthrie. The suspect, he said, could absolutely strike again. And the reason he said it should terrify every person watching this video, that what really happened to Nancy Guthrie? That question has consumed the nation for 6 weeks. It has generated more than 40,000 tips, a combined reward of $1.2 million, and enough online speculation to force the sheriff to publicly clear the family multiple times. But amid all the noise, the theories, the false leads and dead ends, investigators have quietly assembled a picture of that night that is more disturbing than anyone imagined. Because Nancy Guthrie was not the victim of a random crime. She was not in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was targeted, deliberately, carefully, by someone who knew exactly what he was doing and exactly who he was taking. The timeline of her disappearance is now public record, pieced together from digital breadcrumbs that her kidnapper either could not erase or did not know existed. On January 31st at 5:32 p.m., Nancy traveled to her family's house for game night. At 9:48 p.m., her son-in-law dropped her back home. At 9:50, the garage door closed. For the next 4 hours, everything was normal. Then at 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, her Nest doorbell camera was tampered with and disconnected. At 2:12 a.m., another camera detected motion but recorded nothing. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker application disconnected from her Apple devices, meaning she was no longer within Bluetooth range of her home. At 2:36 a.m., a Ring camera 2.5 miles away captured a vehicle speeding past at an unusual hour. At noon, when Nancy failed to appear for an online church service, family members went to check on her. They found the door unlocked. They found her phone inside. They found her medication on the counter. And they found blood on the front porch. DNA confirmed it was hers. That blood tells a story that investigators have only begun to fully understand. Retired FBI agent Maureen O'Connell recently analyzed the blood evidence for News Nation, and her conclusion is chilling. "What I do believe is she was carried out," O'Connell said. "I don't believe she walked out. I believe she was carried out by 2 people, and I say that because of the blood droplets, the fact that there's no void, the fact that there's no footprints, it's almost like 2 guys carried her, and her head tilted in some way, shape, or form, and it just came out right there. 2 people. That changes the calculation entirely. If there were 2 people involved, then somewhere out there, there's an accomplice, someone who helped, someone who knew, someone who may be sitting right now, 42 days later, wondering if the person they helped is going to turn on them, wondering if the $1.2 million reward is enough to make someone else talk." The theory that more than one person was involved in Nancy Guthrie's abduction is no longer speculation. It is now an official line of investigation. On February 20th, Pima County Sheriff's Department spokesperson Angelica Carrillo issued a statement that quietly but significantly expanded the scope of the case. Investigators are not ruling out the possibility that more than one person may be involved, Carrillo said. That single sentence opened the door to a reality that forensic evidence had been pointing toward for weeks. The blood on Nancy's porch, the lack of footprints, the precise timing, the coordinated disabling of multiple cameras. These were not the actions of a single individual working alone in the dark. These were the actions of a team. The retired FBI agent Maureen O'Connell has been the most vocal expert pushing this theory. In multiple interviews with News Nation, she has laid out a compelling case for why the physical evidence demands multiple suspects. "What I do believe is she was carried out," O'Connell said. "I don't believe she walked out. I believe she was carried out by two people, and I say that because of the blood droplets, the fact that there's no void, the fact that there's no footprints, it's almost like two guys carried her, and her head tilted in some way, shape, or form, and it just came out right there. That analysis changes everything. If Nancy was carried, then the suspect seen on camera was not acting alone. He had help. Someone inside the house. Someone outside the house. Someone who has not been seen in any footage, on any doorbell camera, in any neighbor's recording. A ghost in the operation. And ghosts, in criminal investigations, are usually the ones who break first. The DNA evidence recovered from Nancy's home adds another layer of complexity to the accomplice theory. Sheriff Nanos confirmed in late February that some of the biological samples collected at the scene contained DNA from multiple people. This is not unusual in a violent crime, but it creates significant investigative hurdles. It will take time, possibly months, to separate the DNA samples so they can be fed into law enforcement databases, Nanos said. Mixed DNA profiles require sophisticated analysis to distinguish which genetic material belongs to the victim, which belongs to family members with legitimate access to the home, and which belongs to potential suspects. That process is underway, but it is slow, deliberate, and frustrating for a public desperate for answers. April Stonehouse, a forensics professor at Arizona State University and former DNA analyst for Government Crime Laboratories, told News Nation that she remains hopeful investigators will find usable DNA samples that might help identify the suspect. Speaking about the surveillance images showing the suspect without a mask covering his mouth and nose, Stonehouse noted that this is a good thing because it means he may have left saliva samples in the home. Blood, semen, and saliva are the most useful substances for DNA analysis, she explained. When analyzing crime scenes, you are at the mercy of what the suspect left behind. She said authorities will be looking at items that they think the suspect handled or used in Guthrie's home. "I would be hopeful that they found at least a few items of evidence," Stonehouse said, adding that the suspect would have left DNA samples in the home. "It's just a matter of locating it and finding it. But finding the DNA is only half the battle. The other half is identifying who it belongs to. And that is where the accomplice theory becomes not just forensic, but psychological." Maureen O'Connell has argued that the presence of multiple suspects creates a pressure cooker that will eventually explode. Speaking about the $1 million reward offered by the Guthrie family, O'Connell painted a vivid picture of what is likely happening right now, somewhere in the shadows of this case.
To a home in the
If there's
Catalina
more than one
foothills, a
person
ranch-style
involved in
house
this,
that
which I
Nancy would
believe
live in
there
for the
is,
next 5
they're now in an
decades.
air fryer,
Same blood was
O'Connell
found
said.
at or
And it's
near
just a
the entrance
question
of the
of
home.
who's going to
Forensic
jump out
testing
first.
confirmed the
If we put
DNA
ourselves
belonged
in
to
the minds
Nancy.
of the perpetrators here, you're like, "Oh, we can't say anything, we're going to go to prison." Yeah, one person's going to go to prison, but we all know if the accomplice comes forward and gives up the guy, there's a really good chance he can get off and get $1 million. That analysis cuts to the heart of every multi-perpetrator crime. The person who planned the operation, the architect, the one seen on camera, he holds power over the accomplice. But the accomplice holds something equally valuable: information. And information, when combined with a 7-figure reward, becomes an irresistible force. O'Connell noted that the accomplice was unlikely to receive a substantial amount from the operations organizer, observing that people do this stuff for as little as $2,500. So whatever the amount is. And then when the amount went up to $1 million, the heat went up 1,000,000 degrees. I mean, this person is thinking about it, and the other person involved knows they're thinking about it. This psychological warfare is playing out in real time, 42 days into an investigation that has produced no arrests, no public suspects, and no sign of Nancy Guthrie. The accomplice, if one exists, is living with a secret that grows heavier every day. Every news conference, every reward increase, every expert on television talking about the air fryer adds pressure to an already unbearable situation. And Maureen O'Connell posed a question that hangs over this entire case. Why isn't anybody coming forward? When you look at the other side of that coin, there's only one reason they can't, she said. And it's because they're the only one, and they're the only one responsible, or, I can't come forward because I kidnapped her and now she's gone. If the accomplice is real, if that person is out there right now watching this coverage, they're facing an impossible choice. Stay silent and hope the architect stays silent too. Or speak, collect the money, and accept whatever consequences come. Human nature suggests that someone, eventually, will choose the money. The question is whether they will do it before it is too late for Nancy Guthrie. It's the question that hangs over every high-profile investigation, the one that families ask in the dark hours before dawn, the one that investigators whisper to each other over cold coffee and stale reports, is simple. Why hasn't someone talked? 43 days into the search for Nancy Guthrie, with a reward now exceeding $1.2 million, with her face on every screen and her name on every newscast, with the pressure building like steam in a sealed container. Why has no one come forward? Steve Moore, a retired FBI agent who spent decades chasing people who thought they could keep secrets, has an answer. And it is not comforting. I think the reason is most likely the fact that the only people who have knowledge of this are culpable. Moore told News Nation's Brian Ennin, whatever they've done it in such a way that they've kept it from other people. The circle is tight. The secret is contained. And the people who know where Nancy Guthrie is are the same people who put her there. This is the reality that investigators face as they enter the 7th week of this case. The 40,000 tips that have flooded the FBI's National Threat Operations Center have been reviewed, categorized, and pursued. Thousands of hours of footage from neighborhood cameras have been analyzed. DNA samples have been collected and processed. The desert surrounding Nancy's home has been searched on foot, on horseback, with drones, with helicopters. And still nothing. No arrest. No public suspect. No sign of Nancy. The reward, one of the largest ever offered in an Arizona missing person case, remains unclaimed. And Moore's explanation for that silence cuts to the heart of why this case has proven so difficult to crack. If the horrible thing is true that Nancy is no longer alive, there's not going to be a good deal for you, Moore said, speaking directly to the hypothetical accomplice who might be weighing whether to come forward. And how are you going to spend $1 million when you're going to be in prison for most of the rest of your life? The reward, for all its eye-popping size, comes with limits. If you were involved in the crime, if you are culpable, you're not eligible. The money is for the person who saw something, who heard something, who knows something but was not part of the plot. The problem, as Moore sees it, is that in this case, there may be no such person. The circle may be that small that possibility aligns with what Greg Rogers, another former FBI agent, has been saying since the earliest days of the investigation. Rogers told Parade magazine that he never believed the theory that this was a robbery gone wrong. The timing alone disproves it. There are a good number of interstate home burglars that are much more careful. Case homes know when the owners are away and are in and out in minutes, Rogers said. They do not hit residences when it is almost guaranteed someone is home. Nancy was home. She was asleep. Her car was in the driveway. Her lights were off. Anyone watching the house would have known she was there. A burglar looking for an empty house would have moved on. This person did not move on. This person came prepared that Rogers believes the suspect almost certainly knew Nancy, or at minimum, knew enough about her life to plan the abduction deliberately. I think it is highly likely that someone who knew Guthrie or had something to do with her, home maintenance, health care, yard and pool care, was involved, he said. That person could have been hired to provide information about security systems, about Nancy's schedule, about when she would be alone. Or that person could have worked in one of those positions and simply observed, learning the rhythms of the house, the vulnerabilities of the woman inside, the opportunities
to a home
that
in the
darkness
Catalina
provides.
foothills, a
This
ranch-style
theory has
house that
gained
Nancy would live in for the
traction
next
among
5
investigators,
decades.
according
Same blood
to
was
multiple
found at
sources.
or near the
Sheriff
entrance of the
Manos has been
home.
careful
Forensic testing
not to
confirmed the
confirm
DNA
specifics,
belonged to Nancy.
but his public statements have pointed in this direction. On March 12th, during an interview with NBC Nightly News, Nanos was asked whether the suspect could strike again. His answer was immediate and unambiguous. Absolutely, he said. We believe we know why he did this, and we believe that it was targeted, but we're not 100% sure of that. So it'd be silly to tell people, yeah, don't worry about it. You're not his target. Don't think for a moment, because it happened to the Guthrie family, you're safe. Keep your wits about you. The sheriff's words carry weight because they come from a place of knowledge. He knows what the evidence shows. He knows what the DNA indicates. He knows what the digital breadcrumbs reveal about the suspect's movements before and after that night. And he knows that the motive, whatever it is, may not be unique to Nancy. If the suspect targeted her for a specific reason, that reason may also apply to other elderly women living alone in affluent neighborhoods. That is why the warning was necessary. That is why the public needs to stay vigilant. But what is the motive? Nanos has been deliberately vague, citing the integrity of the investigation. In a previous interview with the Daily Mail, he acknowledged the central question. The motivation for it is where we get stuck, right? Is it for money? I mean, we had the one demand where they asked for money. But is it really for money, or is it for revenge for something? The demand he referenced was a ransom note sent to multiple news outlets in the days after Nancy's disappearance. The note demanded money, but provided no instructions for delivery, no contact method, no way to negotiate. Investigators have treated it with skepticism, unsure whether it came from the actual kidnapper or from someone trying to exploit the situation for attention or profit. Steve Moore, during his appearance on Brian Investigates, laid out the range of possibilities that investigators are forced to consider. It's getting more possible every day that they were driven by money, Moore said. But he did not stop there. I think that this had to do with violence or sexual activity or pure robbery or randomness. The mention of sexual violence is jarring. It is not something the media discusses openly in cases involving elderly victims. But Moore, with decades of experience in violent crime, refused to shy away from it. When it impressed him on whether that was statistically relevant, Moore responded bluntly, "It is not statistically irrelevant at all. It is something society has to deal with, and it's so horrible that the media doesn't publish stories about it usually, while the psychological pressure builds on any potential accomplice. The forensic investigation has been quietly assembling a digital puzzle that spans months, not days." On February 12th, the Pima County Sheriff's Department issued a request that barely registered in the national coverage, but may prove to be the most significant investigative step yet taken. They asked every resident within a 2-mile radius of Nancy's home to submit camera footage from January 1st through February 2nd. That is an entire month of surveillance video from an affluent neighborhood densely populated with Ring cameras, Nest doorbells, and sophisticated home security systems. The request covers the month leading up to Nancy's disappearance and the day after she was taken. And it is being processed using technology that would have seemed like science fiction just a decade ago. Carl Epps, a digital forensics examiner with more than 25 years of experience, explained to Tucson's 13 News how investigators are handling the deluge of visual data. You're looking for things that aren't supposed to be in the area, but that are, Epps said. That distinction matters. The suspect, if he conducted reconnaissance in the weeks before the abduction, would have appeared on someone's camera. He would have driven through the neighborhood. He would have parked somewhere. He would have walked past a house, stood on a corner, lingered near a fence. And somewhere in that mountain of footage, his image exists. The challenge is finding it. Investigators have access to specialized forensic tools, including artificial intelligence systems designed specifically for this purpose. We could take a volume of images or videos, and we can use our forensic tools and actually have the tools pre-analyze the data for us, Epps explained. An investigator can program the system to identify every time a person or vehicle appears in the footage. The AI then compiles those moments into a digestible timeline. Now, all of a sudden, as an investigator, I sit down and I look at 1 hour of video that has movement in it, rather than 48 hours of video that's all nothing. These systems can also cluster similar images together. If a particular van appears 4 times over the course of a week, the technology groups those appearances for side-by-side comparison. Patterns emerge that the human eye would miss. A vehicle circling the block. A person appearing at the same time on multiple days. A figure lingering near Nancy's property line. The AI does not solve the case. It simply makes the case solvable by reducing millions of hours of footage to manageable, analyzable segments. But the video sweep extends far beyond neighborhood doorbells. Epps noted that investigators are pulling footage from traffic cameras, convenience stores, anything around the area that's recording. Every business within a 5-mile radius has likely been contacted. Every gas station, every grocery store, every bank with an ATM camera. The suspect had to get to Nancy's house. He had to approach on foot or by vehicle. He had to leave with an 84-year-old woman who could not walk 50 yards on her own. That movement left traces. And those traces are
To a
being
home in the
collected,
Catalina foothills, a
cataloged,
ranch-style
and
house that
analyzed
Nancy would
parallel
live
to
in for the
video
next 5
investigation.
decades.
Digital
Same blood
forensic
was
teams
found
are reviewing
at or
cell
near
tower
the
data from
entrance
the
of the
early
home.
morning hours of
Forensic
February
testing
1st.
confirmed the DNA
Sheriff
belonged to
Nanos
Nancy.
confirmed this line of inquiry in mid-February, explaining that the goal is to identify anomalous devices that don't belong to neighborhood residents during the time Nancy was taken. Every cell phone connects to towers constantly, leaving digital fingerprints that can be tracked. Every time your phone connects to a cell site, there's a record of it, and it's logged as to what device it is, and eventually, you can track it back to who it belongs to, Epps explained. So we can identify who is in the area, and if they're moving around, the timing of the abduction works in investigators' favor. At approximately 2 a.m., most residents of the Catalina foothills were asleep, their phones likely on chargers, connected to their home Wi-Fi networks rather than roaming through cellular towers. Any device pinging towers in that neighborhood at that hour, moving through the area rather than remaining stationary, would stand out as an anomaly. Investigators can establish a pattern of life for the neighborhood, identifying which devices belong there and which do not. Once an anomalous device is identified, they can trace its movements before and after the abduction. Where did it come from? Where did it go? Does it appear on other nights? Does it match the timing of the reconnaissance visits? Epps noted that poor cellular reception in the Catalina foothills could complicate this analysis, but the fundamental principle remains sound. If the suspect carried a cell phone, and almost everyone does, his device left a trail. Investigators just need to find it among the millions of data points. The pacemaker data that established the 2:28 a.m. timeline has also been the subject of forensic scrutiny. Epps emphasized that the disconnection does not indicate that Nancy's heart stopped, only that she moved out of Bluetooth range of her phone, which remained in the house. You can liken it to devices that we all have, Epps said. If you leave your AirPods sitting somewhere and you walk far enough away from them, which isn't too far, they will disconnect and you'll get a message. That message was the first digital indication that Nancy was no longer in her home. Unfortunately, the pacemaker cannot be used to locate her now. The device relies on near-field communication, requiring close proximity to connect with other devices. Very unlikely we are able to get a signal from it unless we are right on top of it. Epps admitted that while digital forensics advance, the ransom notes continue to complicate the investigation. On February 18th, TMZ reported receiving a fifth communication from individuals claiming to be Nancy's kidnappers. This latest note was described as a highly sophisticated demand, requesting payment in cryptocurrency, this time with a specific account number included. The FBI confirmed they had received the information, but remained publicly non-committal about the authenticity of any of the notes. That what makes these communications particularly frustrating for investigators is the lack of proof of life. In any genuine kidnapping, the captors typically provide evidence that the victim is alive. A photograph, a recording, a message in the victim's own words. The Guthrie family has pleaded for exactly that. Savannah Guthrie, in an emotional Instagram video posted 2 weeks in her mother's disappearance, directly addressed whoever was holding her. "We will pay," she said. But no proof of life has ever arrived. That silence is deafening, and it has led some former investigators to a grim conclusion. Jennifer Coffin-Daffer, the retired FBI special agent who has been providing analysis throughout this case, told Newsweek that the absence of proof of life likely means Nancy is already dead. I think that's because it did go so wrong. They could not prove the life because she passed, Coffin Daffer said. That analysis is not speculation. It is pattern recognition. Coffin Daffer has seen this dynamic play out in case after case. When kidnappers cannot provide proof of life, it is almost always because there is no life to prove. Something went wrong during the abduction. Nancy's health may have failed. The stress may have been too much. The violence may have escalated beyond what was intended. The blood on the porch suggests struggle. And struggle, for an 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker, can have fatal consequences. On March 12th, a body was discovered in a desert area southeast of Tucson, near Kolb Road between Escalante and Irvington. The Tucson Police Department responded to the scene, and speculation immediately erupted that Nancy Guthrie had been found. But the department quickly clarified that foul play was not suspected based on preliminary information, and sources indicated the body was almost certainly not Nancy. The discovery was a cruel reminder of how this case unfolds. Hope, then disappointment, then more waiting the same day. Sheriff Nanos gave his NBC News interview, revealing that investigators believe they know the kidnapper's motive. Jennifer Coffin Daffer seized on that statement, calling it a big clue that reveals the entire trajectory of the investigation. He starts off saying, "Yes, we have what we believe to be the motive," which is huge because whenever you find motive, you find suspect, Coffin Daffer told Newsweek. She noted that when Nanos was asked about the possible motive, he said it was something investigators looked at from the beginning. That, to Coffin Daffer, is a roadmap. What were they looking at the beginning? Kidnapping for ransom. Kidnapping for ransom. That was the entirety of the theme, she said. That's why they had the family go on television, making social media posts, making this plea. That's why they orchestrated all of that.
Savannah
Savannah
home in the
Guthrie's
Catalina
pleas,
foothills,
her
a
siblings'
ranch-style house
videos,
that Nancy
the
would live in
repeated
for the next
offers to
5
pay,
decades.
all of it
Same
fits
blood
the
was found
pattern
at
of a
or
ransom
near the
kidnapping.
entrance of the home.
But if ransom was the
Forensic
motive,
testing confirmed
where
the
is the
DNA
demand?
belonged to Nancy.
Where is the negotiation? Where is the proof of life? The notes exist, but they are erratic, changing cryptocurrency addresses, demanding different amounts, offering different information. Some demand money for Nancy's return. One demanded 1 Bitcoin, approximately $67,000, for the name of the individual involved, not for Nancy herself, while investigators work to identify the masked figure captured on Nancy's Nest camera. Another layer of evidence has emerged from her property that the public has never seen. On March 14th, ABC News reported that the FBI has recovered additional surveillance images from cameras positioned around Nancy's home that were trained on her swimming pool, backyard, and side yard. These are not doorbell cameras. These are motion-activated security cameras that capture a wider view of the property, angles that the front door camera could never see. And according to sources briefed on the investigation, these cameras captured something that investigators are now analyzing closely. Multiple individuals observed in the back and side yards over an unspecified period of time prior to the abduction. The video footage from these cameras was not recovered. But thumbnail images were captured each time the cameras were triggered by motion. Those thumbnails, frozen moments in time, show people moving around Nancy's property in the weeks and months before she was taken. Nothing suspicious was recorded at the time, according to the report. But in the context of a meticulously planned abduction, those thumbnails may hold crucial intelligence. Who were these people? Were they neighbors? Delivery workers? Landscapers? Or were they something else entirely? The Pima County Sheriff's Department responded to the ABC News report with a carefully worded statement that confirmed the existence of this evidence without revealing its contents. The department continues to analyze various forms of evidence in the Nancy Guthrie case, including material from laboratories as well as images and videos captured by cameras, the statement read. At this time, we will not comment on the details or status of this analysis. That this development is significant for reasons that extend beyond the specific content of the images. It confirms that the FBI's forensic recovery efforts have been more extensive than previously known. When Director Kash Patel released the doorbell camera images on February 10th, the public assumed those were the only visuals available. They were not. The Nest system captured the front door. But Nancy had other cameras that recorded different angles, different times, different activities. And those cameras were also connected to the cloud. Their data was also recoverable. Investigators have been sitting on this material for weeks, analyzing it quietly, building a timeline of who came and went from Nancy's property in the period leading up to her disappearance. The existence of these additional images raises a question that goes to the heart of the investigation. If the suspect conducted reconnaissance, as the multiple date doorbell footage suggests, did he also appear on the backyard cameras? Did he walk the perimeter of the property, testing sightlines, checking for blind spots, learning the layout from every angle? If he did, and if those cameras captured him, investigators now have additional photographs of the suspect. Different angles, different lighting, potentially different clothing. Every additional image is a new data point, a new opportunity to identify him through distinctive features, gait analysis, or forensic examination of his equipment. The timing of this revelation, coming from ABC News on March 14th, suggests that investigators are entering a new phase of the case. After 6 weeks of relative silence, leaks are beginning to emerge. Sources are talking. The information flow is shifting from complete containment to strategic release. This often happens when investigators believe they are close, when they want to put pressure on specific individuals, when they need the public's help in identifying someone who may be on the periphery of these newly recovered images that parallel to the visual evidence. The digital forensic investigation continues to process cell tower data from the area surrounding Nancy's home. Heather Barnhart, a forensic expert with Celebrite and the SANS Institute who worked on the Brian Kohberger case, explained to the Daily Mail how the FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey team, known as CAST, is approaching this evidence. You have to know what normal is to find evil, and this person's phone would be considered the evil, Barnhart said. The CAST team is methodically shuffling through batches of cell tower data from a wide area around Nancy's home, constructing profiles of normal phone activity versus abnormal activity in the hopes of spotting a potential outlier in the patterns that the night of the abduction provides a clear digital signature that investigators can follow. Between 1:47 a.m. and 2:28 a.m., Nancy's doorbell camera was disabled and her pacemaker app disconnected from her devices. During that window, someone was inside her home. Someone was taking her, and that someone almost certainly carried a cell phone. If the suspect powered his phone off during the abduction, as Brian Kohberger did during the Idaho murders, that power-off event would create a digital gap, a period of silence that stands out against the normal pattern of continuous connectivity. When the phone powered back on, it would ping nearby towers, creating a location trail leading away from Nancy's home. Unless these people knew exactly where they were going, their phone will be off and then suddenly ping, Barnhart explained. So not just cell towers right by Nancy's home, but take it a few miles out, spread out, and look. The reconnaissance visits create another digital opportunity. If the suspect scouted Nancy's property in the weeks
To a
before the
home in the
abduction,
Catalina
his
foothills,
phone
a
may have
ranch-style
pinged
house that
towers in the
Nancy would
area
live
on
in for the
those
next
dates as
5
well.
decades.
Investigators
Blood was
can
found at
cross-reference
or
those
near
dates
the
with
entrance
the
of the
newly
home.
recovered
Forensic
surveillance
testing
images.
confirmed the
Looking for a
DNA
phone
belonged
that
to
appears
Nancy.
in the area at the same times that unknown individuals appear on camera. It is painstaking work. It requires correlating visual evidence with digital evidence, building a mosaic of movement that ultimately points to a single device, a single subscriber, a single name. Barnhart noted that digital forensics takes time, and the public's desire for immediate answers conflicts with the methodical nature of the work. People, I think, want answers immediately, and I get it, but it's hard to do digital forensics thoroughly, she said. And to me, they're doing a thorough job, and that's why it's taking this long. The Kohberger case provides a roadmap. His phone was powered down between 2:47 a.m. and 4:48 a.m. on the night of the murders. That gap, that silence, became evidence of intent. In Idaho, that's how we knew, Barnhart said. There is this gap of information where there are no pings from his device. It's weird. Him powering off his phone gave us the perfect bookend of his crime and really proved his intent to do harm to those kids in that house. The cell tower surrounding Nancy's neighborhood will reveal whether her abductor understood the implications of his digital trail. If he powered down during the abduction window and powered back on miles away, that pattern will emerge from the data. If he made the mistake of keeping his phone on, the towers will show his precise route, his speed, his destination. Either way, the digital evidence will tell a story. Investigators just need to read it. Meanwhile, the reward strategy continues to generate pressure. After Savannah Guthrie's February 25th video announcing the $1 million family reward, the FBI saw a surge of more than 750 new tips. That number has continued to climb. Retired FBI agent Jason Pack explained the psychology behind the strategy. Ransom schemes involving multiple people are inherently unstable, Pack said. The more time passes, the more the financial disparity between holding out and collecting $1 million starts eating at the weakest link. The message, Pack noted, is carefully calibrated. Your partners are not going to protect you. We will. It preserves moral off-ramps. Pack described the reward as a direct market disruption that changes the calculus for anyone sitting on information. A driver who saw something, an accomplice having second thoughts, a family member of the suspect weighing loyalty against $1 million. That is a number that can fracture criminal conspiracies, he said. The reward also serves a secondary purpose, generating a new news cycle and sending people back to review their memories of anything unusual they observed in the Catalina foothills in January. Sheriff Nanos, in his March 12th interview with NBC News, provided the most significant update in weeks. Asked whether investigators have identified a motive, Nanos confirmed that they have. We believe we know why he did this, he said. We believe it was targeted. He declined to elaborate, citing the integrity of the investigation, but the statement itself is a roadmap. If investigators know the motive, they know something about the suspect. Motive reveals relationship. Motive révèle intent. Motive reveals the kind of person who would target an 84-year-old woman in her home. But the sheriff also issued a warning that undercuts any sense of safety. Asked whether the suspect could strike again, Nanos responded without hesitation, absolutely. It'd be silly to tell people, yeah, don't worry about it. You're not his target, he said. Don't think for a minute that because it happened to the Guthrie family, you're safe. The warning was directed at residents of Nancy's affluent Catalina Foothills neighborhood, but applies more broadly. If the motive is not unique to Nancy, if it applies to other elderly women living alone in similar circumstances, then the suspect remains a threat. The combination of newly recovered surveillance images, cell tower analysis, reward pressure, and a known motive creates a convergence that investigators believe will eventually yield results. The question is whether it will yield them in time. The warning from Sheriff Chris Nanos, delivered in his March 12th interview with NBC News, was not casual. It was not rhetorical. It was a direct message to every resident of the Catalina foothills and beyond. We believe we know why he did this, Nanos said, and we believe that it was targeted, but we're not 100% sure of that. So it'd be silly to tell people, yeah, don't worry about it. You're not his target. Don't think for a minute that because it happened to the Guthrie family, you're safe. Keep your wits about you. That warning, now in its second week, hangs over a community that thought it was insulated from this kind of violence. The Catalina foothills is not a place where strangers wander through unnoticed. It is not a place where elderly women are carried from their beds in the middle of the night. But it is now. And until the suspect is caught, it remains exactly the kind of place. The sheriff's statement that investigators believe they know the motive is the most significant development in this case since the revelation that the suspect visited Nancy's property multiple times before the abduction. Retired FBI agent Jennifer Coffin-Daffer seized on that statement immediately, calling it a big clue that reveals the entire trajectory of the investigation. He starts off saying, yes, we have what we believe to be the motive, which is huge because whenever you find motive, you find suspect, Coffin-Daffer told Newsweek. She noted that when Nanos was asked about the possible motive, he said it was something investigators looked at
home
from
in the
beginning.
Catalina
That
foothills,
to
a ranch-style
Coffin-Daffer
house
is a
that
roadmap.
Nancy would live in for
What
the
were they
next
looking at
5
the beginning?
decades. Same
Kidnapping
blood was
for
found
ransom.
at or
Kidnapping
near the
for
entrance of
ransom.
the home.
That was the
Forensic
entirety
testing
of the
confirmed
theme.
the DNA belonged to
The
Nancy.
ransom theory has been present since day one. Savannah Guthrie's emotional pleas, her siblings' videos, the repeated offers to pay, all of it fits the pattern of a family desperately trying to negotiate with captors who refuse to negotiate back. But if ransom was the motive, Where is the proof of life? Savannah made that request explicitly in the days following her mother's disappearance. Send proof of life, she pleaded. No proof ever arrived. And Coffin Daffer believes that silence is not strategic. It is final. I think that's because it did go so wrong. They could not prove the life because she passed. She said the absence of proof of life, combined with the passage of 43 days, creates a grim statistical reality. In kidnapping cases where no contact is established within the first 72 hours, the likelihood of the victim being recovered alive drops precipitously. In cases involving elderly victims with medical conditions, the numbers are even worse. Nancy requires daily medication for a cardiac condition serious enough to require a pacemaker. She has been without that medication for 6 weeks. The human body does not survive that kind of interruption. The pacemaker keeps her heart beating, but it does not regulate the underlying condition that required the pacemaker in the first place. That is what the medication does. And that medication is still sitting on her counter, untouched. The newly recovered surveillance images from Nancy's backyard and pool cameras, first reported by ABC News on March 14th, add another layer of complexity to the timeline. According to sources briefed on the investigation, these motion-activated cameras captured thumbnail images of people in Nancy's back and side yards in the weeks and months leading up to her abduction. Nothing suspicious was recorded, according to the report. The images showed individuals who appear to be going about ordinary activities, not casing the property for a kidnapping. But the mere existence of these images means that investigators now have a visual record of everyone who was on Nancy's property in the period before she was taken. Landscapers, pool maintenance workers, delivery personnel, friends, neighbors, anyone who had legitimate access to her home, and anyone who did not. The Pima County Sheriff's Department responded to the ABC News report with a carefully worded statement that confirmed the existence of this evidence without revealing its contents. The department continues to analyze various forms of evidence in the Nancy Guthrie case, including material from laboratories as well as images and videos captured by cameras. The statement read, "At this time, we will not comment on the details or status of this analysis." That statement, issued on the 41st day of the investigation, reflects the methodical approach that has characterized this case from the beginning. No rusing, no leaks, no public speculation from official sources. Just slow, patient, evidence-based work. The mixed DNA recovered from Nancy's home remains the best hope for a forensic identification. Sheriff Nanos confirmed in his NBC interview that investigators are still hopeful the DNA will lead to a suspect. But mixed DNA profiles take time to separate and analyze. Each genetic contributor must be isolated, quantified, and compared against known samples from family members and others with legitimate access to the home. Only then can the unknown profile be uploaded to CODIS or submitted for investigative genetic genealogy. That process is measured in months, not days. The public wants answers immediately, as forensic expert Heather Barnhart noted, but thorough digital and genetic forensics simply take time. The $1.2 million reward remains unclaimed. That fact, more than any piece of physical evidence, speaks to the nature of the circle that surrounds this crime. Steve Moore, the retired FBI agent who has been providing analysis throughout this case, put it bluntly, "I think the reason is most likely the fact that the only people who have knowledge of this are culpable. If that is true, if the circle is that tight, then the reward strategy shift from incentivizing outsiders to come forward to pressuring insiders to turn on each other." Maureen O'Connell's air fryer metaphor captures the dynamic perfectly. The heat is on. The pressure is building. Someone is going to break. The question is when. And the answer depends on factors investigators cannot control. The loyalty between co-conspirators, the fear of prosecution, the hope that silence will protect them. But loyalty has a price, and $1.2 million is enough to buy a lot of disloyalty. Every day that passes, every news report, every expert on television talking about the air fryer, every reminder that the reward is still waiting adds pressure to whatever bond exists between the people who know what happened to Nancy Guthrie. Sheriff Nanos has been careful not to overpromise. In every interview, he emphasizes what investigators do not know as much as what they do. They do not have a suspect. They are not 100% sure of the motive. They cannot guarantee that the suspect will not strike again. That honesty, while frustrating to a public hungry for resolution, is the hallmark of a responsible investigation. It means that when Nanos does make a definitive statement, when he does announce an arrest, the public can trust that the evidence supports it. The masked figure captured on Nancy's doorbell camera remains the only visual of the suspect. 5'9" to 5'10". Average build, a black 25-liter Ozark
To
Trail
a home in the
hiker black.
Catalina foothills, a
holster
ranch-style
positioned
house that
near
Nancy
the
would live
center
in
of
for the
the
next
waist.
5
Reflective
decades.
straps
Same
that
blood
caught
was
the
found
light.
at
A
or
man who
near
stood
the
at
entrance
Nancy's
of the
door
home.
on 2
Forensic
different
testing
nights,
confirmed the
once without a
DNA belonged to
backpack,
Nancy.
Once fully prepared, once learning, once taking. That image has been seen by millions of people. It has been analyzed by former FBI agents, by forensic experts, by armchair detectives across the country. And still, no name. Still, no arrest, but the investigation is not static. The newly recovered surveillance images are being analyzed. The cell tower data is being mapped. The DNA is being processed. The reward is being advertised. The pressure is being applied. And somewhere in a house or an apartment or a room that looks ordinary from the outside, someone is sitting with a secret that is eating them alive. The Guthrie family continues to wait. Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show set on March 5th, not to resume her anchor duties, but to thank her colleagues for their support. A source present during the visit told CNN that Savannah thanked her colleagues for caring about my mom as much as I do. She said she has every intention of coming back to the show, but added, "I don't know how to come back, but I don't know how not to. You're my family, and I would like to try." She told them, "I'm still standing, and I still have hope, and I'm still me. That hope is the only thing keeping this case alive in the public consciousness." Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She requires daily medication. She cannot walk 50 yards by herself. She has been missing for 43 days. And the person who took her is still out there, the yellow ribbons tied to trees and fences outside Nancy's home in Tucson remain. Bouquets of flowers, some fresh, some wilted, rest against the fence. Cards and notes from strangers are propped against the gate. A sheriff's vehicle drives slowly past, part of the ongoing patrol of the neighborhood. The desert stretches out beyond, vast and unforgiving, miles of rugged terrain that have been searched and searched again. That's somewhere in that landscape, or somewhere far beyond it. Nancy Guthrie waits. The masked figure believed no one would notice. He believed the darkness and the mask would be enough. But he left something behind. Images, DNA, a pattern. And that pattern is closing in. The investigation does not end with unanswered questions because investigators are not working hard enough. It continues because the person who took Nancy Guthrie covered his tracks carefully. But he made mistakes. He appeared on camera not once, but multiple times. He left DNA at the scene. He visited the property more than once, creating additional opportunities to have been seen, to have been captured on neighboring cameras. And every mistake is a thread that investigators are pulling, that the surveillance images are being analyzed frame by frame. The DNA is being processed through the most advanced forensic techniques available. The tips are being reviewed methodically. The timeline is being reconstructed minute by minute. Somewhere in that massive data, there's a name, there is an identity, there is a connection. The question is whether that connection will be made in time. Sheriff Nanos warned that the suspect could strike again. That warning was not theoretical. It was based on evidence, on motive, on the belief that Nancy was targeted for a reason that may apply to other women like her. Until that suspect is caught, every elderly woman living alone in an affluent neighborhood is a potential target. The family continues to plead for information. The reward continues to grow. The investigation continues to move forward. And somewhere in the silence that surrounds this case, a secret is waiting to be told. That if you have information about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, contact the FBI tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI. You can call the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. You can submit tips online at tips.fbi.gov. All tips can be submitted anonymously. The $1.2 million reward is available for information leading to Nancy's recovery, that she deserves to come home. Her family deserves answers. And the masked figure who stood at her door, who came back to finish what he started, deserves to be identified, arrested, and held accountable. That every detail matters. Every tip matters. Every voice matters.